Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we'll be learning today, Mitzvah Hashem, Daf Yud Gimel, omit Aleph. We have a little bit of unfinished business left over from Yud Beis, omit Beis, at the very end of Siman Kof Lamed Aleph Sif Dalid. We're continuing to learn the Halachos of Tachanun, the Halachos of Tachanun. So, we learned yesterday the halacha that we don't say Tachanun in the presence of a chasen. And all the way down at the closing of Sif Dalid, the Ramah made this statement, V'loi mikri chasen ela b'yom shenichnas l'chuppah. Who's called a chasen? A chasen on the day that he's going to the chuppah, that's who's called a chasen. Comments the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Chavav, Shenichnas l'chuppah, says the Chavetz Chaim, Ubizmanenu, nowadays, Noihagen, our minig is, She'ein Neuflin Kol Shivas Yemei HaMishter, that we do not recite Tachanun, we don't do Nefilas Apayim for the entire Sheva Brachas. Va'afilu im Yom Shvi hu Yom Shmini Shal Chuppah, and that remains true even if the seventh day of the Shivas Yemei HaMishter is actually 8 days from the Chuppah. And we're going to get into it. He's going to give us a case. Im mispalel in kaidem shahaya hachuppah, if we are still davening, let's say mincha, before exactly 7 days may ace la'ace from the time of the chuppah, kigoy, for example, im haya hachuppah ma'at kaidem la'erev b'yom rishon. Let's say the chuppah took place Sunday evening, but it was still Sunday. It was a little bit before nightfall on Sunday, so it is not yet Monday. So halachically, the chuppah took place on Sunday, right? Kigoyin. Emaya chuppah ma'at kaidem la'erev b'yom rishon, ein oimrim tachanun ad yom rishon haba ma'at kaidem la'erev. We're not going to say tachanun all the way until the following Sunday, a little bit before nightfall. So that's Sunday was the day of the chuppah. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Sunday. So day 8, if you include the day of the chuppah, Sunday was the day of the chuppah took place Sunday, a little bit before Shkia, right? So Sunday is the day of the chuppah, and yet on the following Sunday, while it's still Sunday before nightfall, we're still not going to say Tachanun. So that's 8 days, including the day of the chuppah. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, and he says, V'dafka, this whole halacha only applies im haya hechasen bachur, if the chasen is somebody who is not yet married, ay hakala besula, or the kala is a besula who is not yet married. Aval almon shenasa almana, but if we're talking about a situation where it's a second marriage on both sides, if we have an almon, a widower, shenasa almana, who is marrying a widow, or if it's a garush marrying a grusha, ein zen noyeg rak shloisha yamim, then this din of not saying Tachanun only applies for 3 days. V'chein adin b'v'hurachim, and the equal din applies to v'hurachim. In this case, we skip not only Nefilas Apayim but v'hurachim as well. And now the Chavetz Chaim ends off with an interesting line. He says, V'lachein, therefore, toiv li zaher, it would be good to take care, shelo yikanes achasan lebeis hakneses kol shivas yemei hamishta. Very interesting what the Chavetz Chaim says. The Chavetz Chaim says that a chasen during Sheva Brachas should stay away from shul. Shenimnoyin loymar Tachanun ba'avuroi. We've seen the incredible power of Tachanun, and we don't like this idea, says the Chavetz Chaim, that the tzibur is not saying Tachanun because the chasen is there. So says the Chavetz Chaim, the chasen should stay away. Let the chasen stay away so that the tzibur should say Tachanun. If you take a look over here in Dirshu footnote number 41, they bring down V'dasa Chazon Ish. It was the opinion of the Chazon Ish she'ein hachasen tzarich lehimana milelech lehispalel bebeis hakneses, that the chasen should not refrain from going to the to shul. He should go to shul, and if they don't say Tachanun, they don't say Tachanun. They bring down here from Rav Pinchas Scheinberg Zatzal, V'dasa good Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg. You know what the chassid could do? He could go to a shul where nobody realizes that he's a chassid. They don't know him. Or he should go to the shul where they know him, but he should stay in a back corner somewhere where they won't see him and they won't skip Tachanun. But we have over here, the Chavetz Chaim says that the chassid should better stay away from shul so that the tzibur should be able to say Tachanun. Rav Scheinberg is trying to cut in the middle over here. Let him go to shul, but let him go to shul where they don't know him, or let him go to shul where he could hide. Okay, the rest of the footnote over here talks about other people who we don't say Tachanun because of them, like a moil, a bali bris, etc. Now we move on to Sif Hey, top line in the Shulchan Aruch Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Says the Mechaber, Im chala mila b'tainis tzibur. If we have a bris in shul on a tainis tzibur. Now, why are we speaking about a tainis tzibur here? Well, on a tainis tzibur we say slichus. Now, by us, on a tainis tzibur, if it falls out on Monday or Thursday, we also say a long Tachanun with v'hurachim. The Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that there was a minig in the time of the Mechaber that on any day, any tainis tzibur, no matter what day of the week it fell out on, they also said the long Tachanun of v'hurachim, and that's the minig that the Mechaber is addressing over here in the beginning of Sif Hey. And says the Mechaber, Im chala mila b'tainis tzibur. Let's say we have a bris mila in shul on the day of a tainis tzibur. Now, a bris mila is going to prevent us from saying Tachanun. Says the Mechaber, mispalalim slichos, we should say slichos, va'imreim vidui, and we could say vidui as part of the slichos. So in other words, although we already have a precedent that when we have a bris mila in shul, we refrain from the filos hapayim because of the simcha of the bris, and Tachanun is a little bit antithetical to the simcha of a bris. You might think that slichos, and especially vidui, where we get up in front of the Rabbeinu Shalom and we recount our averos, we confess our averos, our misdeeds, you might think that that's also antithetical to the simcha of a bris. So the first thing that the Mechaber says is, mispalalim slichos va'imrim vidui. It's a tainus, we're going to say slichos, and we're going to say vidui. But ve'ein noiflan al pneihem, but we don't say Tachanun, ve'ein oimrim v'hurachim, nor do we say v'hurachim. The Ramah interjects, and he says, we're talking about b'shachris. And afilu b'makayim shenagu la'amroi b'loizeh. And, like I explained, the Ramah tells us right away, the Mishnah Berurah is going to explain it, but the Ramah tells us right away that the Mechaber is addressing a case where the minig was that they said v'hurachim on every tainis tzibur, even if it was a Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday. And the Mechaber is telling us the halacha that because of the bris milah, we're going to skip Tachanun, but we're not going to skip we're going to skip Tachanun and v'hurachim, but we're not going to skip slichas or vidui. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Katan Chav Zayin, Mila, v'huadin chasen, says the same thing would apply if there was a chasen in shul. Again, we would skip Tachanun, we would skip v'hurachim, but we would say slichas and vidui. Ois Katan Chav Ches, mispalalim slichas, we say slichas. It says the Mishnah Berurah, she manichin miktsas, we pull away from some of the extra tefillos that we would say, namely Tachanun and v'hurachim, ve'ein tzarich lahanyach legamri, but we don't put down everything. It's a tainis tzibur. We should be saying slichus vidui Tachanun and v'hurachim in honor of in recognition of the bris milah, or in recognition of the simcha of the chasen. We put down miktsas. We put down Tachanun and v'hurachim, but we do not put down slichus or vidui. The Ramah explained that the Mechaber was addressing a case where the minig is that they said v'hurachim on every tainus. The minig was in some places loymar v'hurachim b'chol tainus tzibur, to recite v'hurachim on every tainus tzibur, av she'enoi b'sheni v'chamishi, even if it's not falling out on a Monday or a Thursday. Afilu hachi im chal mila bay ein oimrim v'hurachim. And what the Mechaber is telling me is, if there's a bris milah or a chasen, then we don't say Tachanun and we don't say v'hurachim. Sivav. Says the Mechaber, second line down, end of the line, here on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Nagu, we are noyig shaloi lipar al penehem, not to say Tachanun b'chamisha asar ba'av, not the 15th day of Av, Tu B'Av, which is brought down in the Gemara in Tainus, that in the Zman of the Beis HaMikdash, it was a tremendous Yom Tov. There was no Yom Tov, there was no Simcha like Tu B'Av and like Yom Kippur, where we found out that we got Kippur Avonos. There's a whole list of very exciting things that happened on Tu B'Av. Maybe we'll get a chance to see it in the, I think Dirshu brings it down. V'loi b'chamisha asar b'shvat, nor do we say Tachanun on Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah le'ilonos. What does that mean that it's Rosh Hashanah le'ilonos? What it means is, when it comes to the fruits of a tree, we need to be able to have a dividing point in the year that where it switches from year 1 to year 2. What date does the year switch when it comes to fruits of the trees? Why do we need a switching point for the year? That's because of Hilchas Maisrus. When it comes to separating Maisrus from Priya Eitz, from fruits of the trees, we know the halacha is that you have to separate, you have to be mafresh your Maisrus from that year's fruits on that year's fruits. So you have olives, you have pomegranates that grew in a certain year. You have to be mafresh Maisrus on those pomegranates or on those olives from pomegranates and olives that grew in the same year. What date, at what date in the year does the year switch? It switches on Tu B'Shvat. That's when the year switches. Now, we're not giving over all the halachas here of Tu B'Shvat and Maisrus on Paris, on exactly what stage does the fruit have to be in by Tu B'Shvat to be considered from this year or from next year. Maybe in Mishnayos we'll go through that. We're not going through that over here. But this is on a high level. This is what it means that Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah le'ilonos. Also, it's brought down that because Tu B'Shvat is this Rosh Hashanah le'ilonos, it's also a Yom Hadin le'ilonos. We're judged on the produce of the trees on Rosh Hashanah le'ilonos, which is Tu B'Shvat. The Gra says that since this comes from a Mishnah, the very first Mishnah in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, Arba Rosh Hashanim Heim, since the Mishnah tells us this halacha, that Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah le'ilonos, it's a Rosh Hashanah similar to what we know as Rosh Hashanah. Now, Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, we have no Tachanun. Since Tu B'Shvat is also a Rosh Hashanah, so on Tu B'Shvat, it's also a Yom Tov, and we don't say Tachanun. V'loi b'Rosh Chodesh, nor do we say Tachanun on Rosh Chodesh, because Rosh Chodesh is, so to speak, a Yom Tov. V'loi b'Mincha Shelafanav, we also don't say Tachanun by Mincha on the Mincha of the day before any of these days that we just listed. The Mishnah Berurah points out that you might be tempted to read the Mechaber, V'loi b'Rosh Chodesh, you don't say Tachanun on Rosh Chodesh, V'loi b'Mincha Shelafanav, and not Mincha the day before Rosh Chodesh. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, this V'loi b'Mincha Shelafanav goes back on the whole list. We don't say Tachanun not on Mincha the afternoon of the 14th of Av, not Mincha the 14th of Shvat, and not Mincha Erev Rosh Chodesh. V'loi b'Chanukah. We also don't say Tachanun on Chanukah, because Chanukah is a Yom Tov. V'yesh oimrim gam b'mincha shelafanav. Over here the Mechaber says it's only a yesh oimrim that we don't say Tachanun mincha the day before the first day of Chanukah, and the Ramah says v'chei noyagin, we are noyag like that yesh oimrim. So mincha, erev Chanukah, we don't say Tachanun. B'Purim, we don't say Tachanun on Purim, ein noiflin al pneihem. Now, it says here, B'Purim, ein noiflin al pneihem, in the plural, and that's because we don't say Tachanun not on Purim, not on Shushan Purim, and indeed not on Purim Katan. If it's an Iberyar, we keep Purim and Adar Sheni, but on Yud Dalet Adar Rishon, which we call Purim Katan, we also don't say Tachanun. And in Yonah D'Yoma, says the Ramah, B'Lag Ba'omer ein noiflin. We don't do Nefilas HaPayim, we don't say Tachanun on Lag Ba'omer. Be'erev Yom Kippur ein neiflin. Erev Yom Kippur, we don't say Tachnun. V'chein be'erev Rosh Hashanah, so too on Erev Rosh Hashanah, afilu shachris. Like this, on an Erev Yom Tov, you would never say Tachnun. Erev Yom Tov is going to have other issues. Erev Pesach is going to be Nisan. We don't say Tachnun in Nisan. Erev Sukkot, we're not going to say Tachnun because we don't say Tachnun any of the days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Erev Shavuos, we're also going to see we don't say Tachnun. But now he says, Erev Rosh Hashanah, we don't say Tachnun. And Afilu Shachris. Even in the morning on Erev Rosh Hashanah by Shachris, we don't say Tachnun. Now let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cut and lamed. B'chamish asa ba'av the Gemara Isa shehaya Yom Tov gadol bizman hamigdash. So if you take a look at Dirshu footnote number 44, first, I thought he gave a list. I saw a list maybe in another sefer. Maybe I'll pull it up. But first, they bring down something very beautiful here from Reb Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg. Zatzal. If you notice, the Mishnah Berurah says, why don't we say Tachnun on Tu B'Av? He says, the Gemara Isa Shahaya Yom Tov Gadol B'Zman HaMikdash. It was a Yom Tov Gadol B'Zman HaMikdash. Okay, that's B'Zman HaMikdash. That's not now. So how come nowadays we don't say Tachnun on Tu B'Av? So he brings down here in the footnote, B'Tama Davar She'ein Oimrim Tachnun B'Tu B'Av Af B'Zmanenu. As far as the reasoning why we don't say Tachnun on Tu B'Av even nowadays, Bir Agayin Reb Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg Zatzal Shas She'es Zu Ru'uya L'Simcha, because the time of Tu B'Av is a time of Simcha. Sharei Azman Goyrim. We know that in Hashkafa, in Yiddishkeit, in Yadus, we always say that if a certain Zman is a Zman of Simcha, then it's a Zman of Simcha, regardless of why, regardless of the specific reason. It's a Simcha because of A? No. That Zman is a Zman that's Mesugel for Simcha. So says Reb Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg, while it might be true that the reasons why Tu B'Av were a tremendous day of Simcha were Negeya B'Zman HaMikdash, but they're not Negeya now, that doesn't change the fact that if Tu B'Av was a Zman of Simcha B'Zman HaBayis, then that means that time period of the year, that day of the year, is a Zman that's Mesugel for Simcha. So then it's a Simcha now also. But then he says something really beautiful. The fact that we keep Tu B'Av as a Zman of Simcha nowadays, because it was a Zman of Simcha, B'Zman HaBayis, Mischaskim anu be'emuna be'bias HaMashiach b'chol yom sheyavai. What that is it strengthens our emuna, and it's a statement, a tangible statement of our emuna, of that Mashiach is coming, and that we are being Mekayim Tzipisa Yeshua. So we keep Tu B'Av as a Zman of Simcha even now. Now, there is a list brought down over here where it just tells you some of the things brought down from the Gemara that happened on Tu B'Av. It says, V'harbe taimim nemru al zeh b'Gemara. There's a Gemara in Tainus, there's a Gemara in Baba Basra, and he gives a few examples. B'yom zeh hutru shvatim lava izeh bazeh. Originally, people from Shevet Ruvain married people from Shevet Ruvain. People from Shevet Shimon married people from Shevet Shimon. You didn't have intermarriages between the Shvatim. On Tu B'Av, it was given the heter to marry between the Shvatim. Ubechein b'yom zeh hutru Shevet Binyamin lavai b'kol. After the mice of Pelegesh Begiva, there was a gzera made on Shevet Binyamin. Nobody should marry into Shevet Binyamin. But after, on Tu B'Av, they canceled out that decree, and they allowed people from Binyamin to marry back into Klal Yisrael. V'kolu by Meisei Midbar. The Dara Deya, the Dara Midbar, when we left Mitzrayim, so after the Chet of the Meraglim, the Rebbeinu Shalom was geyser that all of the Yotzei Mitzrayim, those who were above the age of 20, would die in the Midbar. They stopped dying on Tu B'Av. Ubit el Hoshea ben Elah Hashomrim Shahishiv Yeravam al Adrachim Shemanu Mibnei Yisrael Lalis L'Regel. Yeravam ben Nevat did a terrible avera, and Yerav ben Nevat was the Melech Yisrael, and he didn't want Yidden from Malchus Yisrael to go up to be Oil Regel to the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Tov. Why? Because the halacha is that only a Melech from Malchus Beis David was allowed to sit in the precincts of the Beis Hamikdash. So Yerav ben Nevat realized what's going to happen. We're all going to go be Oil Regel. I'm a Melech. I'm the Melech of Malchus Yisrael, but there's a Melech from Beis David on Yehuda. We're all going to get together by the Beis Hamikdash, and the Melech from Malchus Beis David is going to sit because he's from Beis David, and I'm not going to be able to sit. Right away, everybody's going to realize who the real Melech is. So what did he do? He set up 2 Avodah Zaros, and he convinced the people that instead of going to the Beis Hamikdash, they should go to the Avodah Zaros, and he set up guards to block people from Malchus Yisrael from being Oil Regel, and this became bottle on Tu B'Av. V'nitnu haruge Beitar l'kfura, also the time of Churban Bayis Sheni, the haruge Beitar, those who were killed after the Churban, those who were killed in Beitar, the tremendous amount of mesim, and they were laying bibizayon without kfura, and on Tu B'Av came the chance that they were able to be buried. So for all of these reasons and more, Tu B'Av was a day of great simcha, Bizman Abayis, and therefore we don't say Tachanun on Tu B'Av. Mishnah Berurah is cut Lamed Aleph. B'chamisha Asa B'Shvat. We don't say Tachanun on Tu B'Shvat. Shuhu Rosh Hashanah Ilonos. He brings down over here, the Mishnah Berurah brings this down from the Magen Avram. V'noyagin ha'ashkenazim laharbois az b'binei peros shel Ilonos. That there was a minig amongst the Ashkenazim to eat lots of fruits from different trees on Tu B'Shvat. It's certainly a minig by the Sfardim. Ois Katan Lamed Beis, Shelafanov. The Mechaber said that we don't say Tachanun on Mincha of the previous day. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Mashma Mizeh, you might have taken an indication from the language of the Mechaber, the Chamisha Asa B'Av, V'chamisha Asa B'Shvat, Neuflin Memincha Shelafanov. Maybe Tu B'Av and Tu B'Shvat, you do say Tachanun Mincha the preceding day. In other words, the 14th of Av and the 14th of Shvat. Ve'ein noyeg in Kain, but that's not the minig. The minig is that we don't say Tachanun on the 14th of Av, the 14th of Shvat, the days preceding those days as well. And he brings this down from the Olas Tamid. Ois Katan Lamed Gimel, B'Purim, on Purim, we don't say Tachanun. And again, the language of the Mechaber was, B'Purim ein neuflin al pineihem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu b'shnei yomim, because we're talking about 2 days here. We have Purim and Shushan Purim. V'chein b'Purim Katan b'shanim uberes, so to Yud Daled Adar Aleph. U'b'chol elu ein oimrim gam b'mincha shalafanav. In all of these cases, we also don't say Tachanun by mincha of the preceding day. V'chein b'lag ba'omer. So on Lamed Beis ba'omer, we don't say Tachanun by mincha. Milavad be'erev Rosh Hashanah u'be'erev Yom Kippur oimrim b'mincha shalafneihem. So erev Rosh Hashanah, we do say Tachanun by mincha, and so to erev Yom Kippur. Ois Katan Lamed Daled be'erev Yom Kippur u'b'shar erev Yom Tov ein tzarich levayer. We have spoken here about erev Yom Kippur and erev Rosh Hashanah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, other Yom Tovim there's no need to discuss here, because on other erev Yom Tovim we don't say Tachanun for other reasons as well, as I alluded to previously. You know, whenever we come to the discussion of Tachanun by mincha, I always remember a certain Rav who was asked why it is that by the minig is by many who daven Nusach Sfard that they don't say Tachanun by mincha. So this Rav, who actually I believe davened Ashkenaz, but he was in a shul that davened Sfard, this Rav responded and he said apparently by Nusach Sfard there are 2 minhagim. There are 3 minhagim. There's one minig that seems to be in the minority, which is to say Tachanun. Then there's another minig that doesn't say Tachanun. Then there's a third minig, and that minig is not to say Tachanun. It's a very not passive. There's the passive minig, we don't say Tachanun, but then there's the active minig. We are noyig not to say Tachanun. Okay, Siv Zayin. Says the Mechaber. Minig Pashut, it's a simple minig. I guess he means obvious. Shaloi lipal al Pneya b'chol chodesh Nisan, that we don't say Tachanun for the entirety of the month of Nisan. V'loi b'Tisha B'Av, not on Tisha B'Av. V'loi ben Yom Kippur lo Sukkos, not on the days between Yom Kippur and Sukkos. V'loi mitchilas Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the Ramah says, also not from Rosh Chodesh Sivan and Achar Shavuos until after Shavuos. Till precisely when after Shavuos? Let's see in the Mishnah Berurah. So let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. Is cut and lamed hay. Uminik pashut, says the Mishnah Berurah. Ubechol elu ein oimrim tachnun gam b'mincha shelifneim. On all of these times that are listed over here, we also don't say tachnun mincha of the preceding day. V'hinei kol elu asifim hula inyan tachnun. Everything that we have discussed so far has been negeya to whether or not we recite tachnun. Aval lamnatseach. But lamnatseach mizbal David yancha Hashem b'yom tzara, that we say between Ashrei Uval Tzion, Oimrim Bekulam. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we say lamnatseach on all of these days, milavad, with the exception of Rosh Chodesh. On Rosh Chodesh we don't say lamnatseach. V'Chanukah, Upurim, the Erev Pesach, the Erev Yom Kippurim, v'Tisha B'Av. On those days we don't say lamnatseach. V'huadin she'ein oimrim b'shanam uberes, also during an Iber we don't say lamnatseach b'yom haba asar v'chamisha asar ba'ad arishin, on Purim Katan or Shushan Purim Katan. Gam ein oimrim oisai b'beis ha'aval. We also do not say lamnatseach in a shiva house. Oid kasvu dekeler chapayim v'lamnatseach dinam shaveh. The halacha of lamnatseach and the halacha of keler chapayim that we say when we take out the Sefer Torah, those have the same din. Now, if you take a look at Dirshu footnote number 47, he goes through one at a time why we don't say lamnatseach on this list of days. Says over here, V'atam b'chol elu, the reason for all of these days why we don't say lamnatseach is as follows. Bi'er Pri Megadim, the Pri Megadim states, and this is in the Mishpatzos, he says, Sherosh Chodesh oimrim by halal v'nikra moed. Rosh Chodesh is called a moed, it's called a Yom Tov, and mitam minig, we say halal. It's only a minig, that's why we say chatzi halal, but mitam minig we say halal, so it's antithetical to lamnatseach, to calling it a Yom Tzara. Chanukah, lefisha oimrim by halal shalem. Chanukah we say halal shalem, certainly we're not going to say lamnatseach. Purim, lefisha hem yimei mishta v'simcha. Purim, Shushan Purim, these are days of mishta v'simcha, can't call it a Yom Tzara. Erev Pesach, we can't call a Yom Tzara. Sharehu kama Yom Tov. It's Erev Pesach is almost a Yom Tov on itself. Levisha makrivim by Korban Pesach. Many people don't realize the Korban Pesach was brought on Erev Pesach. You ate it Pesach night, but it was nikrav. It was brought Erev Pesach. So Erev Pesach is like a Yom Tov on its own. Erev Yom Kippur, you don't say lamnatseach. Shaharei osar lehis anois boy. Not allowed to fast on Erev Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av would seem like a natural that we should say lamnatseach, yet we don't. Why? Lefisha nikra moyed. Tisha B'Av is actually called a moyed in the pasuk. Diksiv kara alai moyed. Pasuk in Eicha. So there's much Torah said on this. Why Tisha B'Av is called a moyed? Maybe on the future, because Mirtz Hashem la'asud lavai, after Mashiach comes, it's brought down that Tisha B'Av is going to be nepach l'moyed. It actually is going to be a Yom Tov. Yodalad v'tesvav ba'adarishan, mishum shegam bahem marbim b'mishta v'simcha. The Pri Megadim says that Purim Katan and Shushan Purim Katan, these are not just, like throwaways. No, we're supposed to be marbim b'mishta v'simcha a little bit on Purim Katan and Shushan Purim Katan. Ubebeisa Oval. Why don't we say lamnatseach in the house of Shiva? Mishum she'oval hukish l'chag, she'nemar v'hafachti chageichem le'evel. On some level, Avelus is also referred to as a chag. Okay, weiter. The Ramah said that we don't say Tachanun from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until after Shavuos. Eiskan Lamed Vav in the Mishnah Berurah says the Mishnah Berurah ad achar Shavuos, until exactly when after Shavuos. V'yesh b'kaimais, the Mishnah Berurah brings down from the Magen Avram. There are areas, v'yesh b'kaimes nayagin, there are areas that have the minig, shaloi lipail kal shisha yamim sha'achar Shavuos, that for 6 days after Shavuos, we don't say Tachanun. Now this means the 2 days of Shavuos and another 4 days. Memnei sha'karbanu shel chag Shavuos haya lehem tashlumin kol shiva. Okay, now we move on to Sifches, 2 lines from the bottom here in the Shulchan Aruch. So, we have been learning the halachos of Tachanun, Nefilas Apayim. And the Nefilas Apayim that we do is a very mild Nefilas Apayim, right? We put down our heads, we cover our faces. We learned that the original minig was to do a real Nefilas Apayim. They got down on the floor, Kida, Hishtachavoya. Says the Mechaber, Ein Adam Chashuv Rashoy Lipail Al Panav. An Adam Chashuv is not permitted to do a real Nefilas Apayim. This is talking about, the Mishnah Berurah says, the Nefilas Apayim of Kida, Hishtachava, getting down, mamish on the ground, and putting your face down to the ground. That an Adam Chashuv is not supposed to do, Kishem Ispalel Al HaTzibur, when he is davening on behalf of the Tzibur, Ele Im Kein Batuach Sheyanek Yeshua Benun. Unless he is 100% certain that the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to answer his tefillos, like Yeshua ben Nun. Let's take a look at what's at play over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Lamed Zayin. Lipail al Panav. First of all, what does this mean? What kind of Nefilas Apayim is the Mechaber referring to? Hainu kishu derech kida. We're talking about really bowing down to the ground. Va'afilu b'loi pishut yadayim v'raglayim. Even if it's not with outstretched, hands and feet. Va'afilu lo yasham ritzpas avonim. And even if we're not talking about on a stone floor. On a stone floor, everybody's usher to do it. But on a non-stone floor, the b'shar kolad b'shari, everybody else, it would be mutter for them to bow down. But ba'adam chashuv, usher. An adam chashuv is not allowed to bow down in prayer for the tzibur, even if it's not a stone floor. He's not allowed to do it. Why? So we'll get to why. But first, he says, if he turns a little bit to the side, so then I feel al ritzpas avanim shari, then it would be mutter even on a stone floor. The ain zen nefila al panav, because that's not called real nefila al panav. The choshke nefilas apayim shalanu, certainly our nefilas apayim that's only on the table, shuraka toyas haroish, it's only dipping the head down, v'kise panav ba'alma, and simply covering the face, bevadai shari. That's definitely mutter, even for an adam chashuv. So what the Mishnah Berurah is telling us so far just is, understand where this isser that the Mechaber is giving us is negeya. When the Mechaber says that it's usser for an adam chashuv to bow down when he davens for the tzibur, and we didn't see why yet, but when is that? That's talking about really bowing down, not the nefilas apayim that we do. Okay. Pirish ubifnei atzibur. He's davening for the tzibur in front of the tzibur. So he's davening for the tzibur in public. Why is this a problem? Diksif alei milsa shemaharin shein hagun ve'ein roi leonos. Because what happens if he's bispal and his tefillah is not answered? We're not talking about chayni ma'agel here. He davened and right away the rain came. But what happens al kol tzara shaloi tavoi if this Adam Chashuv gets down on the floor and he's responded to the Rebbeinu Shalom and then he doesn't get answered? It's going to be mamish pizyonis. Aval bebeisai, but if he's davening in his house, not in public, I feel him espal al tzibur mutter. Even if he's davening for the tzibur, but he's doing it in his house, then he's allowed to get down on the floor. Va'afil him ifnei tzibur, and even if he's doing it in front of the tzibur, dafka kishu levadoi neifel al panav. It's only a problem if he's the only one going down on the floor. Ve'ena kol neiflin imai, and the tzibur is not also going down to the floor. Dim kol neiflin, if everybody's going down, azayim ein chas v'shalom nenim en gnai kol kach la'adam chashuv. If they're not answered, it's not such a gnai to him. To lo yodef hu meklal tzibur. Okay, so I wasn't better than anybody else. Masha'enken, if the Adam Chashuv is the only one that's bowing down and he's not answered, then it seems targeted at him. It seems that he's not all he's cracked up to be. Ois cut lamed tes. So an adam chashuv should only bow down if he is batuach sheyeyonik Yeshua ben Nun, that he will be answered the way Yeshua ben Nun was. Sha'amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where you find that the Rebbeinu Shalom told Yeshua ben Nun, Kum lach lama ata noifel al panecha. Yeshua ben Nun was being mispal, and the Rebbeinu Shalom told him, get up! Why are you down on the floor crying? You don't have to. So Yeshua ben Nun was answered right away. If an adam chashuv is 100% batuach that he will be answered by the Rebbeinu Shalom, just as Yeshua ben Nun was, then he could bow down in prayer in public on behalf of the tzibur. If not. Okay? We're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made on Gans Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs parnassah shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the Bias Gael Tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu amen. Be well.